Hello, everyone. Thanks, Annie, for the introduction. And yes, as it has been said, I'm working with the medium of sound art and contemporary performance, and I usually talk about my practice as material based, meaning that I don't necessarily start within the idea, but I usually start working with the material in itself, and depending on what kind of material I'm drawn to, or what kind of material I have at hand, I then develop an artwork around this particular material. And by material, I mean both physical objects, found objects, but also specific spaces, specific locations where I am at that moment, or a specific technology which I'm curious about. And before talking about some of my sound projects, I want to maybe introduce a little bit the field of, or the way how I approach scenography, because this is the field where I originally come from, and this is the field in which I actually, which was a gateway into the sound arts for me personally. Yes, as Annie mentioned, I have graduated in scenography for alternative and puppet theater. This is in faculty of Academy of Performing Arts in Prague, and within this context, I also established my artistic collective called PYL, P-Y-L, and these were also people who graduated from the same faculty, and we were all interested in working with scenography-based theater pieces, scenography-based performances, and approaching scenography as in expanded way, which means that it's we worked with it not necessarily as a, let's say, secondary element of theater production, but really as a guiding force of creative process, and actually also as a dramaturgy force, because how we usually work with PYL is we gather certain materials which we are interested in, and then we play with them. So we don't necessarily define what is going to happen, but we see how this material acts at this moment, and we in a way explore possibilities of staging this material and facilitating such conditions which can allow for material to perform. In 2021 we wrote this little manifesto on scenography without borders, which somewhat describes our attitude to the field of expanded scenography, and describes many of its categories, and the way how we work with this scenography in artistic field, but also how scenography appropriates our personal lives and so on. And this manifesto actually was born as part of project called Reality Surfing, which was our third production, but maybe the first quite serious one, because it was a co-production of two platforms in the Czech Republic, which made this possible. And in this work, we were working exactly with this idea of exploring possibilities of facilitation of performance of objects and materials, and it was something what we created in collaboration with all these different, let's say, objects or maybe creatures. It's we somehow were trying to approach every element involved in this process at the same level as human body or the body of performer, and maybe in this context the performer or a human involved in the production is actually becomes rather a facilitator of this performance of the objects, or a servant in a way. So we were working with we started with a completely empty space, which then gradually filled with different stuff, which created this kind of landscape scenography, and then things were happening within this scenography. So part of that was also the appearance of different new species, which was happening in a way by combining different ready-mades or combining different objects. We then gave this birth to new species, and one of them I wanted to introduce you was it's something what we call a talking paddle. A talking paddle is it's a combination of the insides of this maybe you know it's this toy which usually appears in the shape of a little hamster. So this is a hamster which then it repeats what you say. So it has this tiny recording module which has a capacity to record up to 20 seconds, and then it says what you say to him. And this was one of our actors, but it was slightly transformed into this new appearance of a talking paddle. I will make show a short video.
With all our arms, all our legs, we move and grab, we walk and clap. We move and grab, we walk and clap. Are you? You're using shoes, buying gloves. Horses have hooves and wings of doves. Future has no prince.
So yes, these were the talking paddles, and why I wanted to show this fragment is because what we see here is this very, let's say, very low tech and very primitive object, but by gaining attention, it somehow also maybe becomes alive, or it's something. With this attention we bring life to this object, which actually consists of very cheap Chinese electronics and some silicon surface, which is then animating by the motor, and maybe this attention for us was kind of crucial for any kind of appearance of the most elementary objects on stage, and this is pretty much maybe it illustrates quite a lot the way how I approach material and or any kind of technology that I use in my works, in theater field, but also in sound arts. And what I often return to is the idea about how technological performance is frayed in contemporary society, because what we are what we are used to is we are actually surrounded by constantly performing technologies, and this is how this is the list of different companies from mentioned in the book by John Mackenzie, Perform or Else, and where he explores the definition of performance within corporate, military, and technological systems. Mackenzie suggests that the performance as both cultural and technological process organizes contemporary power structures, merging productivity, efficiency, and representation into one operational logic. And so this is the list of various companies which sells videotapes, aquarium filters, cars, stereo equipment, staplers, tires, carpets, and all of these appliances, all of this stuff performs for us various services, and I find it quite impressive that in this context the better performance is the more invisible it is for us, or the more seamless the more seamless is its appearance. And what I am interested in is how this logic can be reversed in artistic context, or not necessarily, even just by raising this awareness about performing stuff, performing technology. How can we notice it more and be aware of all of these processes which are happening around now in this room, thanks to this microphone, thanks to the wall, thanks to air conditioning in the space we are now having this encounter. And so I'm quite drawn to the idea of reversing this logic of technological performance in different ways. So this is the diagram from Parika and Hertz as an appendix to the book Geology of Media, where Hertz explains the logic of reversing the black box. Black boxing was a term introduced by Bruno Latour, and it basically reflects the way how contemporary technology is designed. With the progress, it actually becomes more and more enclosed. The black box, as any of electronic devices we use, it appears to us as this mysterious object which insights are more and more inaccessible, and which insights are also some sort of zone of experts which cannot be accessed so easily. I can also refer to this idea very much, because I was growing up in post-socialist context where access to technology is pretty limited, so it's not something what I was used to work with. Neither as part of my studies, technology for me always appeared as something very, very mysterious, and somehow I had this respect of and alienation that if I would touch it, it would immediately break, and it's something what creates a lot of alienation, which I think is very becomes more and more problematic. And all the physical stores with the electronic equipment or technology, they disappear. All the repair stores disappear. So there is a lot of distance created, and it's quite interesting to observe this process. But for me, maybe working with electronics, or working with creating my own technology, let's say, it's usually pretty low key. So I'm not speaking about any professional equipment. I work with very simple materials, but for me this is maybe one way how I can eliminate this alienation and eliminate this distance between me and technical objects and technical material. And my first work where I tried to do that was it was called 555 bugs, and at the times I positioned my my interest in the combination of scenography and sound design. This was for me somehow the reference point for this work, where I was interested in how to create autonomous objects which can serve both as a scenography and sound sources. So I started to develop these little bugs. This is how I call them, because the sounds they produce, they remind me of little insects. It's basically a series of little boxes which are based on the most primitive oscillator you can build with NA555 chip. It's an oscillator which consists of 4 components, and I created these different objects which have different things on the outputs, piezo speakers, tiny vibromotors, little sirens, and so on. So they are all battery powered, and they all can be dispersed in the space, and I usually perform with them live in different spaces. And here are a few sound examples of how it sounds. sonic bug. Yes, so the size and portability of the objects allows for very versatile settings in very different spaces. So I performed this work in indoor, also outdoor, and it was very interesting to also react on conditions of different spaces. So this was a performance in Roman Theatre in Lisbon, which was a very special context to perform in. And when I was somehow finalizing this work, or after maybe 2 years of performing with it, or it's usually also when I work on my sound projects, it's very hard for me to say that one thing is over and another thing is starting, because it's all somehow it's all a bit interconnected. So then I started to develop this work further and create some new objects, but what I found interesting is working with this idea of sonic scenography, and and then eventually I started to developing other objects for this work, and also working with some more installation-like settings where objects are not controlled by this oscillator circuit but by microcontrollers. So I did different settings with similar sonic bugs levitating in the space on found pieces of ceramic and other objects. I also developed a series of workshops for children around the same subject of working with the simple electronic circuit and idea of animation of objects with small motors or other little devices. And here I wanted to do also a reference of people who somewhat inspired me, or whose approach I found referring to this idea of somehow highlighting the agency of material and highlighting the agency of the instruments. Though also some people from the list are coming from completely different backgrounds of free improvisation or composition, or as well as science. Such, for example, Felix Hess was originally a scientist, but and he was exploring the technology of boomerangs in Australia when, because he was so fascinated that this is an object which can it comes and then it returns, and he was doing it for a couple of years, but was not really coming closer to any conclusion, and eventually he got inspired by frogs in Australia, and he started to create these creature-like objects which were imitating this behavior of a frog. And this is a little fragment where he speaks about it himself and describes the insides of his objects.
That's there. And the microphone is that's there. And the microphone is here, which is on the left. It has a battery, which is its food, and it has some electronics, all analog electronics, which is the rest of its body and soul. The sound that comes in, the microphone changes the sound into an electric signal, and then there is a recognizing filter which checks if the sound is of the right kind. There's a beep, 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 beep. What comes through I call good sound, and the rest I call bad sound. And that's stored in certain storage bins, which are called integrators. The level of the good integrator is the eagerness of the machine, and the level of the bad sound integrator I call the shyness. And then there's something which compares the two. When the eagerness is higher than the shyness, the machine will call, and then it will discharge the integrator. So it stops calling. And then all the time, the shyness leaks away, so he forgets the bad sound. And the call generator, which makes the call, and the recognizing filter, they should fit like a lock and key, or else they cannot recognize each other. So that's basically how they work.
Yeah. So when Hess encountered these frogs in the lake in Australia, he was fascinated by the fact that they when they gather and they are happy, then they sing, and they sing very loud and beautifully. But when they feel that there is this alien body nearby, they, of course, how he says it, they become shy and they stop singing. So this was kind of the soul filter for the machines, which he then developed and which were working as an installation. So the more still is the visitor, the more these robotic frogs would sing, and the more movement there is around, then the less they would act in the space. And other authors is, of course, Rian Kayima, who was I think also presenting here a talk some years ago with Pierre Berthet, Arnaud Jacobs, a Belgian artist, Petr Valek, sound artist from the Czech Republic, Katerina Undo with her project Creatures Clusters. I think I will not show these works, but maybe if someone wants to make a note about it, you can look at it later. Yes, after $555, I started to develop this other series of sound objects, which are also motorized but in this case I work with motors as audio drivers, meaning that I connect them to the output of little low voltage amplifiers, and I send an audio signal in there, so objects generate sound and also movement, so they respond to the frequencies of audio signal, and the material which is attached to the motor, it acts as a sound filter, which it's when you look at it, it's a bit confusing because you don't necessarily understand what is happening. I would have a little video later, but this is how it would sound. There is also a lot of saturation of the signal, and so this is why sometimes the sound stops. And the percussive sound, it's the sound of the object which is attached to the shaft of the motor, and the sounds of the field recordings. This is what the motor sounds like. Yes, and after this work, I was working on I started to be interested in the idea of amplification in a way that before all my previous works were acoustic, and I always performed with an amplification of the space, and then I started to be interested in amplification and working with different states and different levels of amplification. I was curious about states which are also there before amplification happens. So with the process itself, with the state of the object before it becomes amplified, and somehow I was interested in playing with hierarchies of this process, and I started developing this setup of different pairs of electret microphones. I tried out different capsules, also with Grant Smith from Soundtent from London was giving me some advices, and I experimented with different electret microphones, and what I had to build in this case is this power converter for reducing the phantom power to lower voltage, so I can power the capsules directly from the mixing console. But what was naturally happening is that I was working with a lot of artifacts. I was working with a lot of wind, a lot of distortion, a lot of feedback, and in this context, these sounds were not unwanted, but this was something what was brought into focus, and what was actually the objective of this research. So I again worked with some semi-autonomous objects, but I integrated equipment for sound capturing in this live performance context. These are some of the objects. Yes, and this is how then the live performance would look like. Also, depending on the space, I would adjust the scenography and the setup to this space. This was in a small gallery. Maybe we can make it a bit louder. It's a quiet one. Thank you. usually when I perform live, I of course have some kind of plan or some kind of clue of what I will be doing, but because many of these systems are pretty unstable, I don't always know what to expect from their behavior, and often they also misbehave. But this is also something what I find quite interesting, because then the performance becomes a collaboration of me with these objects, with these creatures, animals. I don't like to call them instruments, because I like to give them their right to manifest, or to manifest their creativity. Yes, I also developed a series of workshops around the same work, where we worked with the same type of equipment, but in this context with more low-tech, like multi-channel setting, when every object or every little speaker had its kind of network of. There would be a microphone, a little handmade preamp, or a preamp of a recorder, which can be also used, and speakers. So we worked with this intervention in the forest when we created a little low-tech acousmonium with people performing in the woods, and. So this is another version of the same work, but where I work with battery-powered equipment and with more spatial setting, which was actually developed together with another artist, with Pierre PPP is his nickname, with whom we for the first time worked with this idea of more independent setting, where when each object has its own amplification system, and we somehow were interested in the idea of getting rid of the mixing console and working with something what we called performative routing. So the process of not necessarily having needing to press to work with the knobs or buttons on the mixer, but with the physical movement in the space, where we had to move the speakers around in order to change the spatial situation of sound diffusion, and this is how this setting work. And this is also where you can see some of the objects from the previous work Kraina, which I described before, with the motors as audio drivers. So this is a small video of it. No, this one. Yeah, so this is the project called Wiredness Studio. We developed with Pierre. Now I was dropped in the beginning. I would. Yes. Here we are back. And I think the time is actually coming close, so I will just briefly speak about the latest work which I developed in collaboration with Kunrad. This is the video of the prototype, but we already finished the installation meanwhile. We were working on the project in Sound Art Lab in Struer, where we found a lot of in this area around the fjords. We found a lot of little stones. So the stones have naturally formed hole inside, and we found out that these objects were used a lot in the past, also for different reasons. They were used as toys to play with, and then they were called hulko, which means from Danish a hollow cow, and they were also used in more magical context to hang in front of the house to protect the household, and actually also in different cultures they had a bit of these connotations of possessing certain powers. So we collected a lot of these stones and also other objects from the area, limestones from the landscape, and these are heat sinks which we found in in the stock of components of Bang Olufsen, which was the place where the residency was founded a couple of years ago. Very interesting place, very interesting context to work with, and so this is where we were developing this first prototype, and yes. So here it's based on one slowly rotating motor which runs this three loops of on the video. These were the rubber loops. Now we are using strings from the toy engines, and yeah. So this is Hulko, and I think on this slide I would close my talk. But maybe if we have some questions or comments, we can still discuss it. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Maryia. Yeah, that was brilliant. I think quite a few students, past and present, have been quite into kind of kinetic art and the intersection between kind of sound art and kinetic art. So yeah, really brilliant. We've had a few past lectures. I think Rita Evans springs to mind, and Maddie and Grace. What's that artist's name again? Mosquito Farm, exactly. So yeah, ties in nicely with some other previous guests. Who would like to start? Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. That was so interesting, and I was really looking forward to your talk, and it's so amazing to see your work. And I'm very interested right now in kind of connection with things and objects and materials myself as well, and kind of at the beginning of this, what seems like a very deep, maybe potentially very deep exploration in a way. And I'm interested because the way you work with materials in terms of like building things, and of course like listening maybe to the agency of materials to bring objects that then sound to life is really really helpful and inspiring. But I wonder, do you ever start with sound of an object and ever like listen to it and try to find the same kind of agency and negotiation starting from the sonic aspect of an object And how would you do you also ever record the sounds of objects rather than working, I guess, with materials by building things? Do you ever compose with them?
Yes, it's actually some of the fragments which we were listening to. These were compositions from my first album, where I actually worked with the recordings of the same materials which I usually use in live performance context. But and this was a very interesting experience to actually then listen to and look onto this sonic material without having this visual reference, because somewhat it created completely new narratives for me. And I used some of the unedited recordings, but also I then composed a bit more with let's say with quite some detailed micro sample like materials, and it created it generated a lot of new presences, which somehow it was a very interesting journey to go. And I think I often approach it also from this maybe slightly animalistic perspective, or of course there is a lot of I find it quite ironic actually, this idea of maybe liberating from anthropocentric perspective, but then all of the time going backwards. No, it's something what we can totally relate to as humans. So it's something what becomes pretty attractive and pretty tempting to go back to this animation, but from slightly anthropomorphic perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you escape that?
How do you escape that?
Do you?
I think I stopped escaping that, because it's something what I often work with. But maybe one way to escape for me was to go a bit to this direction of this idea of which is called object biographies. It's used mostly in maybe ethnography or anthropology studies by researchers who research community through material culture. And this is what for me was quite an interesting discovery a couple of years ago, because it's object biography concept. It's something what proposes us to explore different levels and of material. So it has so this top of my puzzle has many different layers. It has material layer, but it has also historical, political, economic layer, and there is so much in there, on which I can project, but also I don't need to project because there is already so much contained. So this was one way maybe to escape this.
That's so interesting. Do you ever? I'm sorry for extending this, but is there any way that you followed the physicality of sound itself, rather like kind of almost detached from the object and just focusing on the sound itself? Or you don't really go in that direction?
Maybe not so much in my solo work. In one theater production I worked on sound design. So this is where we were kind of exploring this sonic presence of sound as an object. But I didn't work with it a lot on my own. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting such beautiful work. I absolutely loved it. I can see a little bit of sonic parallel with some of the work I'm trying to do at the moment, although coming from a very different angle. So I'm really interested to know if you have an underlying philosophy or an underlying political point or a comment that you're trying to make through doing this work. I can see that you're working with materials and trying to bring out the voice of that material, but I wondered if there was anything about climate change or relations to our relations to materials, how we use materials.
Yeah, I think it's something what I try to speak a bit in the beginning of the talk in terms of this relation to technical material, and maybe also in a way of opening up what technical material could be. So I think this is what interests me, and also I was mentioning a bit about playing and playing in this in the way how we create with the collective pool, but also this is pretty much how I create myself, and I actually had a quote for this, because in praise of profanation, Georgia Agamben, he proposed profanation as a political task, and this was play as a political task, because play is something what kind of liberates anything from any preconceived meanings, and which really opens up any type of established logic in relation to anything. So it's creates temporary rules for any kind of situation, and it's actually it's an alternative to capitalism. It's what he says is, whereas consumption makes impossible the use of what it devours, play by contrast opens the sphere of pure means of human action that, while devoid of any end, is entirely free for use. So this
Thank
is
you.
perhaps my answer.
Hi, thank you. I'm really inspired by your practice, as I'm also in the area of theatre, sound design and scenography and sonic dramaturgy. So I guess I had two questions. The first is about sonic dramaturgy and kind of sound as storytelling in performance, and the second one being about how the bodies we inhabit affect our relationship to art. I recently read this book called Time is the Thing a Body Moves Through, which kind of posits this idea that the bodies we inhabit affect our relationship to art in different ways and to time. So I don't know, not really a question, but prompts for comments.
About the role of the body in this type of work, or how
Yes,
do I
and
approach
also
them?
sonic dramaturgy, if you can talk a bit about that.
Well, in my live performances, I think this is something what actually it's quite an interesting question, because when I started, I didn't necessarily relate to it in a very I was not very much aware of it myself, but I've heard from many people that this is the physical element is very, very important. Physical element of my own body is very important part of this work, and but as I mentioned, I always perceived myself a little bit as a servant of all of stuff, servant of the materials. But I think lately I'm much more aware of it, and I think it's also something what defines a lot the something from your second question, the sound dramaturgy, because it's my body and the material which I use, they have both their temporality. The objects I interact with their possibilities are pretty limited. So to create sound dramaturgy, I need to become a very active agent. I need to act in a certain way, and with a certain speed and certain coordination and orientation in the space. So it becomes kind of an engine for all possible events in the space, and I actually rarely improvise. I mostly work with the composition or with the structure which I plan before I perform, and because my setups, they are usually quite complicated. It takes a couple of hours to set it up properly, and and to change one state from the other, it also takes time. So I usually plan everything in advance, and then depending on how my collaborators act, then this structure can change. But yes, I work with the composition in this way. I don't know if that answers, but.
Hi, so I'm a student from the MA Creating and Collection from another college. Yeah, so I'm coming here because I want to, in the future, I want to work with the field of sound art, and especially improvisational performance. So thank you for introducing such a practice to me. It is beautiful. And so my question is about, because I've seen, like from my general observation to sound art, I realized there are a lot of performances that are almost artist-led. So I don't see that there's an obvious role of a creator involved in this type of project. But my question is, if there is really a creator to be involved in such project, how do you balance the artistic autonomy, at the same time balance with the curatorial discourse or the curatorial framework of the project? So how do you reach such consensus with the creator? Yeah, that's my question.
Well, I think many of the shapes this my work was taking was also, let's say, partly affected by the possibilities offered from different institutions or people curating in different spaces. So, for example, the video from the festival Lisboa Soa, from the Roman Theatre. This was extremely unique opportunity to perform this in this space with all its limitations and with all its affordances. But originally, my intention to create these works was also to be as autonomous as possible, because often it's not always possible to rely on possibilities in all the contexts where I perform. I can perform in the institution, but I also perform in squats. I also perform in places with no facility, and for me it's very important to do both, or to be present in both contexts, because there I get my inspiration. So yes, it's there is a lot of inspiration coming from the, let's say, the offers or the spaces, the context of performance. Another time there is a Reveal festival happening in London every day on the Down, Chorus Day, and this was the first invitation for me to actually perform outside, which I never had the chance to do before, or maybe I was also slightly afraid, but people from the sound tent invited me, and they were saying, no, it's perfect situation. We will make a sound diffusion of your objects with the radio, and I thought, this is great. This is a great curatorial input. Yeah.
So right to say that the spatial environment that affects your performance more, because most of your performance, they are improvisational and it is like intuitive. So maybe the external environment has more effect to your performance?
It has a lot of impact, of course. Every space has a different acoustic. Every space has a different visual presence, and so I just bring some final sparkles into the space which already exists on its own. Yeah, in a way. So it's a collaboration.
Thank you.
So thank you for your talk. Have you ever considered what your practice might look like if you were working at a different point in history where you didn't have access to all of the electronics that are kind of such a driving force behind the autonomy and sounds that your work produce?
If I ever thought of it.
Yeah, have you considered what your practice might look like if you weren't able to work with these electronics?
And I think maybe this side is this is something what we are trying to do with my collective a lot, because often we work with at least in the constellation of at least 3 people, often more, and this is where all my attempts to bring autonomous objects in this context were complete failures, because we are already enough of people and enough of and we have enough of staff to facilitate some situations. So this the example of talking paddle was quite an exception in our practice, because most of the time we don't work with, or we do work with electricity, but this is one of the really basic means which we are using in our practice. Yeah, so yes, I did in this in our collective, and it usually really it reminds of a playground. It's quite an open space where different things can happen and things can be played with without the expectations. Yeah, this is what we imagined, and this is what we did.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Maybe just to close off, 2 questions from me. Oh. One late question.
Hi there. I would like to ask, in terms of your considerations of your work in a space where you consider the relationship between your work and other artists' work beforehand, because when I was doing like sound art pieces, like this kind of installations, I always feel like struggling to deal with other sound in the space. So I would like to ask your perspective on that. So like how you deal with, if there are several projects in one gallery going on, how you see them and how you would adjust your works based on that.
I do not work a lot with in installation context, or so far I didn't. I did a few installations, and in one case this was also a part of the curatorial input. So this is something what relates to one of the previous questions. So it's something what is then done in collaboration with the person who is curating the exhibition, and who is aware of who has an overview of these other sounds, because sometimes I do not have that overview until the moment when I arrive with the prepared artwork. But when I perform in the space which already has certain type of acoustic or let's say sound events happening, sometimes it's also quite interesting overlap. Once I performed in the underground crossroad, and there was a lot of external sounds of people passing by and cars crossing the street above, and it's then these 2 sonic environments coexist, and I accept it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just to wrap up in case there's anything else. Okay. I wanted to just ask you quickly to talk about documentation, because your works were not only beautiful but very beautifully documented. So any tips for our students and staff here? And also what the setup is for the performance on Sunday.
For the documentation, I like to document the process as well. So this is a tip which I can give to not only document the products, but also make all the possible notes about what you are using at this day and at the other day. And and what do you think about this on this day and the other day, because often it's hard to make a clear conclusion without taking these other things into consideration, and of course it's nice to dedicate a moment to documentation and to give time to this process as well, because it's of course something what can help to facilitate any other situations in future. So I cannot say that I'm very good at it, but I had some lessons and I started to do it a bit more now. And for Sunday, yes, I will play in a duo with Daniel Dariel, who is in this room also, and I use my usual setup with from the last work with a lot of electret mics smashing all around and feedbacking and monkeys and yeah, it's this very balancedly unbalanced setting, and my colleague Daniel Dariel, he is working with the Maximus P environment, and it's it's these two very different environments which somehow mirror one another, and very textural and percussive performance, and there will be 2 more acts. So very welcome to the Muse Coachworks this Sunday. Thank you for
Amazing.
listening.
Thank you so much, and sorry about the fire alarm, everyone.